Last week, we basically laid the premise for the rest of the course by explaining what is the Jewish perspective on. I'm just going to mute if I can, everyone, and then please unmute yourself if you'd like. How do I do that?
You don't mind.
I'm just going to mute everyone, and then please unmute yourself if you have a question. All right. This is the wrong one. JLI. This one. Okay. Those on the Zoom, you can see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right. All technicalities aside, and now we begin.
Yes.
So last week, we explained the premise that the Jewish perspective on death is that death is not the end of life, but death is actually a transition to a new phase of life. And in order to understand what that means, why is that a new, like, how can you say if a person's dying, what does it mean it's a new phase of life? So we had to really dig a bit deeper to understand, okay, who is the real person? And we discussed that according to the Kabbalah, it's the soul. And then what is the soul? And then how do you use that idea to deal with the fear of death? And what's more important to Judaism? Is it life here in this world or the hereafter? And how they're both important. It's like two sides of the same coin. And that was last week. This week, we're going to be, it's actually a jam-packed week. We're going to be discussing four different topics. First of all, the moment of passing, the process of the soul's departure, care for the body that we do with the burial, and then finally, if we have time, if not, we'll have to leave this one for next week. We'll see how much time we have. We will speak about the significance in Judaism of visiting the grave. So, what happens when the soul leaves the body? Obviously, we know in general, the soul moves on, but what is actually the process of this soul leaving the body? And us here, the ones who are being left behind, the loved ones, what is our relationship with the person, with the soul? Obviously, a soul, what is the soul? Is it like some sort of thing with wings? How do we or can we relate to a loved one after they've passed, when they're just in the form of a soul? And really, that's going to be a theme that will take us through this lesson, is the ongoing relationship that we back here in this world can have with our loved ones even after their passing, which is a very, very fascinating idea. But in order to sort of lay the groundwork for this concept, I'm going to start with a story, and we're going to read it's going to be a little bit mystical in the beginning, but if you bear with me, it's only going to be mystical for the beginning, and then we'll move on from there. But we're going to be reading a letter that Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was the first Chabad Rebbe in the 1700s in Russia, he was the founder of the Chabad movement, and he wrote his seminal book, which you may have heard of, is called the Tanya. Okay? Now, just to give you a bit of the historical context, in the 1700s in Russia, in Eastern Europe, there was the greatest leader of the time of the Jewish movement then was the Maggid of Mezrich, or Dovber of Mezrich, which actually our son Dovber carries the name after the Dovber of the Maggid of Mezrich, the name of Dovber. After he passed away, he had many, many students, and Rabbi Shneur Zalman, who later became the first Chabad Rebbe, he was actually the youngest of all the students. He was from the more younger students, but more from the senior students was one of them. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Horodok. Now, so he was a colleague / mentor of the Alter Rebbe, because he was they were both students of the Maggid, but he was slightly older, so the Alter Rebbe sort of adopted him to be his sort of next mentor after the Maggid had passed away. And what happened was that the Rebbe Menachem Mendel of Haradach, he had a long life dream to make Aliyah to Israel. He really wanted to move to Israel. And eventually, sort of in his senior years after he retired, so to say, he gathered together with a group of 100 of his Talmidim, of his students, and they made the long, arduous journey from Russia to Israel. And the Alter Rebbe, he joined the journey at the beginning, and somewhere midway, his teacher, his mentor, told him, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, or as we call him, the Alter Rebbe, which is the Yiddish phrase means the Alter Rebbe means like the old Rebbe because he was the first Rebbe. So he says, I'm sorry, but you really need to go back to Russia because I can see that you are destined to sort of keep the Jewish world in Russia alive, and you're supposed to be the leader. And if you come with us, there's going to be no one back there to take care of them. So you should go back to Russia, and we will carry on. And obviously they departed. Alter Rebbe went back to Russia. It eventually became... Yes, so he managed to reach Israel. And they settled in the city of Tiberias, of Tiberia, in the north of Israel. And back then, again, this is in the year 1777, there was nothing there. It was desolate, and the people, they were very poor. There was very little opportunity for making a living. And one of the Alter Rebbe's main mission that he's done in Russia was to collect money, and he founded a charity back then of sending money back to those in Israel to help them. And he wrote many letters about the importance of giving charity to Israel, and he sent money. There's a long story, we won't get into it now, but now eventually what happened was Rabbi Menachem Mendel passed away. Now the students that were there in Israel, he was everything for them. They had no family, there was nothing. The only reason why they went there was for his spiritual guidance and to be there with him. And after he passed away, you can imagine they were devastated. So imagine you were tasked with the job of writing a condolence letter to his students after their teacher and mentor had passed away. What message would you share with them if you had to comfort them?
To carry on without himself, and he will stay with them as a spiritual soul, and he will comfort them from where he is.
Okay.
And they have no worry whatsoever. Just keep the faith.
Okay, yeah, very good. Anyone else? If you were to writing a letter to them, what would you?
Words that were spoken and taught will always be with you. Like they're a vibration, there's something that's affected everything in your body, so it's going to be with you. Don't forget it.
So the memory and the legacy is still here.
The lessons
that we learned from him.
Heard that and understood it.
Right. So the Alter Rebbe, I need to give one more introduction to this letter before we read it, is that up until now we spoke about the soul as an entity, the soul. What is the Hebrew word for the soul?
Neshama.
Neshama. Are there any other Hebrew words for soul other than neshama? Nefesh. And there's others as well. There's ruach, right? Now, so really, the Kabbalah explains the soul has 5 levels.
Into ghost.
Ruach would be translated into
different stages of the soul. They all neshamot, but with different stages.
So to explain, every person, we have multiple sort of layers to ourself, to our identity, right? So to the neshama, even though it's a spiritual being, but it has 5 levels. Now, for the purpose of this lesson, we're only going to be speaking about the lower 2. But all of them, if you just want to remember the names, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yichida. This is, if you're familiar, every day we have 3 prayers, but on Shabbat and holidays we have 4 prayers, and on Yom Kippur is the one day a year we have 5 prayers, and that's because on Yom Kippur those 5 prayers are corresponding to the 5 levels of the neshama. Each one goes deeper and deeper and deeper till the moment, the end of Yom Kippur, when we scream out Shema Yisrael, that's reaching the highest level of the neshama. But now, what are these 5 levels of the neshama? So we're going to explain the lower 2. The lowest 2 you can see here in your book on page 42. You have the lowest one is called nefesh. This is the part of the soul that gives the physical life to the body. So this is the part that vivifies the body, is called nefesh. So I remember last week we spoke how when God created Adam, first he was a a flesh. He was just a body created from earth. It was just flesh. And then God put in the nostril, Vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim. He put in the soul to make him alive. That is the lowest level of the soul, which is the sort of the part of the soul that's integrated with the physical body and that makes the physical body alive. Then the second level, ruach, is the emotions. And then I'll just mention now the third one, neshama, is the intellect. And then the higher two are parts that sort of, they hover over the body. They're not actually inside the body. They're more whatever. We're not going to get into that now. But the lowest level is the nefesh. That's what makes the body physically alive. The second one is the ruach, which is the emotions and the feelings that you have that comes from the ruach within you. Okay? So with that introduction, I'm going to read now, and I know, sorry, Avi, if you prefer to read in the Hebrew, you have the Hebrew, and then I'm just going to read it in English, but you can read either one, whichever one you prefer. This is a quote again from the Tanya, from the Alter Rebbe. This is the condolence letter that he sent to the students after their mentor, their rabbi, passed away, to try to comfort them and explain to them through this mystical concept what happens after a person passes away. So I'm going to read, it's a little mystical. I'm going to read a few paragraphs. So as it is known, this is on page 43, text 1a. As is known, the life of a tzaddik, of a righteous person, is not physical but spiritual. It contains a faith, reverence, and love. We mentioned this already last week as well. The three pillars of the tzaddik's soul is his faith, reverence, and love. During the tzaddik's lifetime on earth, these three attributes are constrained within the container and garb, namely the nefesh that is bound to the corporeal body. This imposes the restraints of physical space upon these attributes. So what we're saying is that when a person is alive, the soul doesn't have the ability to fully express itself in its infinite way, because since it comes through the body, so it's sort of, the body creates a limitation where we can only express itself. To give you an example, you have a heart, and we feel through our heart, but the essence, the essential feelings that a soul that we can feel is far deeper and greater than what the physical heart could contain. But because when we're alive, we feel through the physical heart, so that sort of limits the feeling that we have to the amount, the ability that the heart can have. Same thing with the brain. You know, it's known that there's studies that a person only uses a tiny fraction of our intellectual capabilities that we actually use. And that's because, again, a brain, part of the job of the brain is to be a physical container and to limit, because sometimes limiting is a blessing. Because, for example, if you were to look at the sun, you know, you can get blind from the light of the sun. If something is too strong, then you can't use it. To give you another example, if you turn on the faucet, yes.
When I learned that, and then I learned that, I was like, connected to there, 5% generally.
Another example is if you turn on the faucet and you want to fill up a cup of water, and we actually have this problem because we have a very small sink, and when you turn it on, it just goes so overflowing, so forceful, that if you put a cup in it, just like the whole thing, it wasn't helping. We had to ask someone to come in to sort of lower the pressure, right? So so the idea here is that when the pressure is too much, you can't receive it. It becomes too overwhelming, and the whole thing, it just starts damaging. It causes, so part of the infinite wisdom of God, He created the body and the brain and to function in a way that it kind of limits the ability of how much we can understand and how much we can feel, in order that we can actually, it's manageable. And that's during the lifetime of a person. So again, going back to the two levels of the soul, we have the nefesh is what makes the soul alive, and the ruach is the emotions. Now, while the tzaddik is alive, or the person is alive, the emotions that one can feel is limited because it's confined through the container of the nefesh. However, I'm going to skip to the next paragraph. By contrast, after the tzaddik's passing, the nefesh separates from the ruach and remains in the grave, while the ruach and its three attributes rise to Gan Eden. Consequently, whoever is close to the tzaddik can receive directly from his ruach in Gan Eden, because the ruach is no longer restrained in a container or confined to a physical space. So what that means is that after a person passes away, what happens is, we know what happens to the body. The body put in the grave, and We know what happens to the body. We'll actually get to that soon as well. We'll speak more in detail. But what happens to the soul? So what we're now really unpacking is that the soul has different layers. The lowest layer of the soul, the nefesh, it's the level that's the most attached to the body. It's intertwined with the body. And that stays with the body forever, even after passing in the grave. So when we bury the body in the grave, the nefesh remains with the body. It's the remnants of the nefesh, not the full nefesh, because the body's dead, obviously. The nefesh sort of isn't in its full capacity, but the remnants of the nefesh remain with the body in the grave. What happens then? The ruach separates, and that goes up to Gan Eden. And at that moment, the ruach, all of a sudden, it's almost like it's liberated, where it can then feel the emotions that it wanted to feel during its lifetime in its full capacity, without the constraints and the limitations that it had during the time that it was alive. And that's the message that the Alter Rebbe is writing in this letter to the students. He's telling them, he's saying that even after your teacher and your mentor and the tzaddik passed away, you can still connect to him. And in fact, in a way, you can connect to him even more than when he was alive. Because what was the life of a tzaddik? It wasn't about eating burgers and pizza. At the end of the day, when you were connected to him, you weren't connected to his physical flesh and blood. The thing that you were connected to was his spiritual life. And his spiritual life is actually greater now after he passed away. And you can connect to him now and receive from him that connection. It's a two-way connection, even more than he was alive. So all the physical avenues of connection shut down. And so now all we're left with is the possibility of connecting on a spiritual level. So to illustrate this idea, because it's a little bit abstract. So we have a video to explain this idea. So again, we have your nefesh is the physical life, ruach is the emotional life. The nefesh remains in the grave, whereas the ruach is the emotion ascends to Gan Eden. Okay? Now, this is the life of a tzaddik, is faith, reverence, and love. During the lifetime, it was only expressed through the body, so it was limited, whereas after the person passes away, you can connect to their essence because it doesn't. Reverence means awe. Awe, okay?
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear? That's what psychologists call inattentional blindness. And no, it is not a condition to be concerned about. In fact, life would be impossible without it. Let me explain. As powerful as the human brain may be, it is easily overwhelmed by the sheer onslaught of observation, calculation, sight, sound, and signals that envelop our every waking hour. The brain cannot permit itself to register and record each image and movement, every message and stimulation. Instead, our brains and nervous systems aggressively filter and limit our intake to manageable levels. The result? We notice a fraction and ignore the fullness, and remember far less. Often, we purposely engage in what cognitive neuroscientists call selective attention, like focusing on a dinner partner in a crowded restaurant, while tuning out all other conversations in the room. Now imagine that you had the ability to absorb everything around you, to absorb, comprehend, and recall all the details, and fetch every memory at will, without being overwhelmed. That is the incredible experience of the human soul, once it detaches from the body at the close of a lifetime. Unshackled from the frailties of a nervous system, unrestricted by networks of neurons. It is unbelievably free and powerfully present. It is free to absorb truths that mortal minds cannot contain, present to delight in the divine radiance that courses through the cosmos, to bask in divine understanding that supersedes human senses, but is savored by the newly liberated soul.
So this is why actually the moment of passing is marked as a very, very special moment. We're going to, again, soon we're going to go into details to explain more from the perspective of us down here and from the physical person who's passing away, what that process is like. But from the soul's process, that very moment, it's almost becoming like it's liberated, where it can now fully express itself in ways that it wasn't able to before. That's the reason why we always mark the yahrzeit of the passing of someone, because the yahrzeit, that very moment, when it reoccurs every year, it's remembering that special moment. So during the lifetime, the expressions of the soul were limited. So using the analogy of a orange flavored sweet. So the flavor is only like, it's not the essence of the orange, it's only the flavor. Whereas after death, when the soul can express and connect to the essential levels, that's like the actual orange itself. However, the problem is the relationship that we have after a person passes away is purely spiritual, because there is no way to have the physical relationship. And obviously us being physical beings, living in the physical world, it can be a little bit challenging to change. Let's say an example of a parent or a grandparent or a loved one who passed away, who when they were alive, the way we connected to them was physical. We were able to give them a hug and to speak to them, to call them up. And then all of a sudden now, it's spiritual. And for us, that might be a little bit of a distant thing to do. So it is indeed a bit of a challenge for us to try to tap into a spiritual way of seeing things. But if we do, we could have actually a real relationship with the person after they passed away, because it's a two-way relationship. They're cognizant of what's happening to us in this world, and we can connect to them just like we saw in this letter from of the Alter Rebbe.
I have
Yes.
a question, Rabbi Yossi, that I put in
Yes,
to you
please.
about tzaddikim, that if somebody dies on Shabbat, that we consider them tzaddik.
Yes. Oh, I didn't research that yet, but I'll try to look that up after for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions so far?
I know these things before, because I didn't know these things attached to what we're talking about. This is only, only a few years now. I've just gone into it. So obviously, when I lost my grandparents, I didn't really know all these things. So does that mean, obviously, I didn't do the right thing?
So we will actually get to that.
Do they forgive us for it?
Yes. So we will get to that in, I think, the third or fourth lesson. We will speak about.
But obviously, I didn't know any better, but
Right.
I didn't do the right thing at the right time. And then how can you
Well, they're in the world of truth. So they know, they know that our intentions are good, and we meant well, and they know that. But we will get to in a later lesson, actually, how things that we can do here in this world for them later. For example, a Yizkar, which we do several times a year and things like that. But we will get to that at a later point. Okay. So, yes, your question.
So, two things really. One, how do we know this? Because
Very good question.
Where is it all this knowledge, or because we take it from you as the truth, but where is the source? Where is it actually being said or interpreted for? And the other thing is, you're saying that the awareness of the Ruach is expanded significantly, but we are still limited where we are. And this connection that you're talking about, we don't seem to have the tools.
I'll give you an example. Okay, so I'll answer your second question first. So to repeat for those that didn't hear, the second question was, if we're saying that the ruach of the person who passed away, the emotions are expanded, and therefore we have a greater connection to them, but us down here, we still have the constraints of the physical body. So how do we benefit from that expansion? And the answer to that is, when they were in a physical body, for example, you need to be in the same physical location, let's say, to go and to learn from them. However, now there's no constraints. So you can be in your house and you can think about them and you can have that immediate connection because they don't have the constraints of their body, even though we have the constraints of our body. This is one of the reasons why it says that 3 generations after, so our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents come down when we're celebrating a family celebration, like a wedding or something like that. We actually, in the Hasidic custom, is we actually, under the chuppah, we say that we're calling the souls of the grandparents and great-grandparents because they don't have, so to contrast, let's say I have.
If you don't know, for the people who don't, if you have a wedding or bar mitzvah
Yeah.
and you don't do that.
They still
then
come.
this-
Yes. So now, let's just say, for example, I have a parent who's alive and I'm making a wedding here in London. My parents are in Chicago. They couldn't make it and they're not here. So because they're alive in a physical body, they're constrained to that physical location. And if they're not here, they're not here. But after they pass away, because they don't have the constraints of the physical location, then they can be here no matter what. So that's the advantage. The first question is, how do we know all of this? And this question will actually intensify when we speak in the 4th lesson all about the afterlife, heaven and hell. And how do we know any of this? Has someone been there to see it and come back and tell us? How do we know? And it's a very good question. And the answer is, you may or may not like the answer, but the answer is faith. Meaning faith that faith in God and in the Torah, that Hashem, who created the world with the Torah, he revealed some of these secrets to us in the Torah and gave them to us. Now, do we have empirical evidence to scientifically prove them? No, and we probably never will. So now it's our choice if we want to listen to it, at least with an open mind, accept it, maybe accept all of it, maybe accept some of it, most of it, up to you, or to say that unless we have empirical evidence, we will reject it all. You can try both options, but from a little bit of, if you take an example for, let's say someone needs a very sophisticated, complex medical procedure. You can go to the doctor and say, I'm not going to take the surgery until you explain to me and I understand everything. You could take that approach, but life will be very slow if we do that, and we might never actually get the answers until it's too late. So we are relying very much on faith, but faith in God, which wrote down these things in the Torah and sort of revealed some of it to us. So I don't know if that answers you.
It's an answer.
It's an answer, right?
Well, experience, I can say before I've discovered, I've discovered a lot of this myself through just scripture, life experience, talking to family. But we have in my family, especially on the Indian side, there's a lot of stories passed down from generation to generation. So it all makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I can say your life experience is valid. Maybe not all of it. The more you talk to other people and the more you find out their life experiences and their ancestors, it starts connecting dots. If you know what I mean, it becomes easier to understand.
So I think it could be very, very personal. My sister is continuously connected. And I'm constantly
Disconnected.
Oh, you wouldn't be here.
Oh, I
I promise
can't.
you. I mean, it's true. You wouldn't be here. I promise you.
Yeah,
I think you are disconnected, but you are
Let's
not.
let's talk about the things, not about me.
Because it's, we say, you don't know it is there, but
And
it's
then
there.
I'm sure that when you actually need it.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have
Yeah.
still a lot to cover in this class. So I'm going to. Yeah. So the challenge we have here is basically, if we want to try to have a real relationship with our loved ones after they passed away, we have to try to tap into the spiritual side of ourselves. Now, to give an analogy for that, an example is, a child. How do we relate to a child? We need to relate to each child on their level. When they're 2 years old, my toddler, I'm playing Magna-Tiles with them. When they're 5 years old, maybe I'm reading them a book. When they're my 9-year-old son, I need to play with him Monopoly and I need to have deep conversations with him. You need to, and teenagers and so on and so forth, you need to relate to them where they are. That's like a key in relationships. Same thing applies. If we want to relate to our loved ones after they passed away, we need to tap in because now they're a soul. And if we do, it can be extremely, extremely powerful. This is one of the reasons why there's a common phenomenon that our loved ones after they pass away, we tend to think more fondly of them. So there's the expression that how does the expression go? That yes, Paul, you know the expression where distance creates fondness, something like that. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Absence makes the heart.
Yes, thank you. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So many people, like I can speak also from our personal experience, thinking about my grandparents, and like sometimes I think more about them after they passed away in a very beautiful and positive light. Sometimes even more when they were alive. You speak when, maybe like my grandmother when she was alive, maybe things she said was a nuisance and this and that. Like now that she passed away, she's holy and she's beautiful and pure and she's loving. So there could be psychological reasons for that phenomenon. But on a spiritual level, we can say that it's actually because it's really true in a way, because their soul, which is their love and their kindness and all the positive attributes, are actually stronger after they pass away. And any negative parts, those don't continue. If someone was, I don't know, an angry person or had negative traits, or I don't know, those parts, those aren't eternal. Those don't really live on. So now we have a sort of a meditation. Each class has a meditation like we had last week. So this is a meditation based on an idea that the Rebbe said, how it was in a letter that he wrote to a family whose mother passed away. And the mother, she left behind little children, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old. And the father, whose wife has passed away, wrote to the Rebbe, how do I explain to my children the fact that their mother is gone? How do I explain it to them? And the Rebbe gave a beautiful analogy, which this will be the meditation for today's class. So feel free to listen, watch the meditation, and
welcome to our meditation reflection for lesson 2 of Journey of the Soul. We're going to try to visualize and relate to the idea of the continuing connection between those who are still inhabiting this world and their loved.
We saved the place for you. Welcome, Samuel, who came stuck in traffic for 45 minutes. You made it. I'm going to just start the video from the beginning, special for you, Samuel. Okay? You had a nice, relaxing meditation to welcome you.
Welcome to our meditation reflection for lesson 2 of Journey of the Soul. We're going to try to visualize and relate to the idea of the continuing connection between those who are still inhabiting this world and their loved ones who have moved on. How can we visualize this connection? So I want to share with you a metaphor that was given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe to a grieving family when they lost their dear mother. The Rebbe told the family, you should know that your loved one, when they pass away, hasn't gone to some faraway place. Really, what is the situation? It's as if the whole family is together on the first floor of the house, and this loved one is in the same house with you on the second floor. So we're going to try to visualize. Again, if it helps you to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. If you want to leave your eyes open, leave your eyes open. But start to visualize in your mind's eye a loved one who's passed on. try to imagine what it was like when you would gather and that person was physically with you. Try to remember the sights, the sounds, the whole setting. And now, imagine that exact same gathering, same setting, and that loved one who's passed on is still there with one difference. They're on the second floor. Take a moment to imagine the feeling. It's hard to describe it, but if we envision it, we may be able to feel it. What does it feel like? The knowledge that this loved one you may not be able to see them, but they're right there, very, very close by, in the same house, where the family is together, everyone is there, and the only difference is they're upstairs, they're on the second floor. Let's try to envision, let's try to visualize a loved one. Try to remember what it was like when they were on the first floor. And now think about the exact same setting. What does it feel like? What does it feel like knowing that they're on the second floor? They're with us. They're with us. They're in the same house. They're only just a few feet away. Not far, far, far away. Very close by on the second floor. Take a half a minute to visualize and try to connect to this feeling of the loved one on the second floor.
Does anyone want to share what came up in this for you?
Tears.
Tears. Do you want to share what's it's one thing that yeah, someone there?
Me, it's me,
Yes.
Rena. Yeah, it's I think it's the feeling that we all get that our loved ones are watching over us. So the meditation saying they're above us, they're just on the next floor, but we can't see them. But that's the feeling that I think many of us get, is that we're being watched over, be it by a parent or a loving grandparent, or, somebody important in the family, in our lives. We feel that they are watching over us.
Absolutely. So we say the neshama is in heaven. Where is heaven? Where is it? Where's Gan Eden?
Lemala.
This will be lesson 4. Lesson 4. We'll answer the question, where is Gan Eden? I'll tell you the answer now. Sorry. How do we go on to the next? How do we turn to the next slide? Here. So the answer is, it's a spiritual things don't have physical space. So Gan Eden isn't in some faraway place. Gan Eden, it's here. It's everywhere. It's a concept. It's a spiritual awareness and consciousness. It's a spiritual world which lives here to get side by side to the physical world. It's not in a specific faraway place. So I think it's a dimension. Thank you. It's a dimension, and therefore I think the powerful thing of this letter from the Rebbe with the second floor is that we tend to have this notion that after they pass away, okay, yes, their souls are alive, but it's in this far away, detached place. I'm saying, no, it's right there. It's a few feet from you, but you can't see it because it's right above. But it's very close, and it's just about connecting to that. So that ends sort of the first part of the lesson. Now we're going to sort of get into the real practical process of what actually happens. What happens to because up until now we were speaking about the soul, the significance of the moment of passing for the soul. But what happens to the body? Okay, so that is where we're going to sort of go now. So it's obvious that the moments before passing can be very difficult for a person who is passing away. That could be. So now we are going to be on page 47. And there could be physical pain, there's emotional pain, there's a lot of different things that, depending obviously on the circumstance that a person is going through. And there's a lot of obviously medical literature about how to deal with a person who's sort of on their deathbed. And you're not coming to me for the medical aspect, but as a rabbi, we're going to highlight a few important points from the Jewish perspective that, especially if you're the one who is dealing with a loved one who is at their end, how do we relate and how do we deal with that? Number one, open and emotionally honest communication with them is very important, and it's comforting. So not to try to lie to them or to cover up, to be very honest with them about what's happening in a very honest and emotional way. That is helpful for them. And also to speak to them, even if they're unconscious and they're not able to respond, but by speaking to them, even if they can't respond, they could hear you. And there's many stories of I've heard first accounts of people who visited people who are unconscious. And so my brother-in-law, his father just passed away a couple months ago. He was quite young. He had cancer, and my brother-in-law was telling me that, you know, he brought my sister had a baby, and they brought the baby, which was his granddaughter, to him. And even though he wasn't able to respond in any way, but he smiled very slightly. They were able to see that even though he can't respond, that it brings comfort to the person, bringing family members together if possible. Physical contact could be comforting. It could be soothing. Sometimes just quiet could be helpful. Some people appreciate music, soothing music, or anything that's meaningful, or speaking about memories, telling them that they lived a good life and they lived a full life, and reminiscing of the good memories. These are all sort of some of the basic etiquette, if you will, how to comfort a person in their last moments. Now, based on what we explained previously, you might think that for the soul, when the soul is released, it's almost like being released from prison. So off to the races. The soul is now happy to leave. So we're going to actually read a very fascinating text from the Zohar in text 2 on page 47. Do you want to read, Adi?
Okay, the seminal work of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, the Zohar, is a mystical commentary.
To read the actual text. So this
All
one.
right. Nothing is as hard for the soul as its separation from the body.
So now we're saying that it's actually difficult for the soul when it leaves the body. Why is it difficult? And the answer is, again, there's two sides to the coin. On one hand, yes, it is true, the soul is ascending to higher and all that, but the moment of the passing is difficult for the soul. 3 reasons. Number one, because this is a transition. Every transition in life is difficult. Even transitions that are positive and good are difficult. Starting a new career, moving house. I can speak, moving, the month before we moved here, it was chaos.
Yeah.
Trying to clean up and pack. Every transition, even positive ones, are difficult. So over here, the soul is transitioning from a life where it was here in the physical world to a life which is completely spiritual. That is a transition. Number 2, the soul, if you remember last week, we said the story how Judah the prince, he was crying on his deathbed, and his student said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Because this world is where it's at. This is where I'm fulfilling the mission. And now it's going into the retirement home, so to say, where it's only getting the rewards, but it's no longer able to actually do anything." So that is the second reason why it's painful for the soul. And the third one is the powerful bond is broken. And this is actually a very fascinating idea, is that when we're alive, as much as we spoke about the soul and the body are not two separate beings. We're one person, I. When you say I, it's the soul and the body intertwined together. So yes, there was a body and then the soul came in the body, but during the lifetime of a person, when the soul and the body, they became so connected that they became sort of inseparable. So to give you an analogy for that, if you take a battery and you put a battery into a device to turn it on, that's a bad example because the battery and the device are separate. And the battery dies, you take it out. But even when the battery was making the phone, let's say, alive, it was separate, even while it's connected. Whereas, the body being alive, it's not like there's like the soul is like the battery. No, it's so intertwined that it's inseparable. Kind of like, a couple that are living together for many, many years. And even if they fight and this and that, but at the end of the day, they're attached. So the soul and the body, they became very closely attached together. And therefore that moment where it separates is painful for the soul. And that's why we're going to explain now a very fascinating thing, that because of this reason, the process of the soul divesting from the body doesn't happen in a moment. It actually happens in stages. It happens in 4 stages. So we're going to read a few different texts from the Jerusalem Talmud and the Zohar, each one saying different milestones of after what happens to the soul after it passes away. So the first one, Monique, you want to read page 49, text 3?
Yes. First 3 days. For 3 days, the soul hovers above the body, thinking that it can return to it. After 3 days, when it sees that the body's face has changed, it leaves the body and departs.
Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, Miriam, would you like to read 4a from the Zohar, page 50?
The first paragraph?
For 7 days.
So, for 7 days, the soul goes from the house where it lived to the grave, and from the grave back to the house, and it molds its body. After 7 days, the body is subjected to its fate, and the soul ascends to its place.
Okay, so we have 7 days. Now, Avi, do you want to read the next one?
For 30 days, the soul and the body are judged as one, and thus the soul is located down here on earth. After that, the soul descends while the body erodes in the earth.
Okay, and now, Deborah, do you want to read the last one?
For 12 months, the body still exists, and the soul ascends and descends. After 12 months, the body becomes numb, and the body rises and no longer returns.
So we have here different, at first glance, they seem conflicting texts. Is it 3 days, 7 days, 30 days? So an answer is all of them are true. It's a process. So for 3 days, so what happens is the soul, it leaves the body, but it doesn't yet know where to go. And it doesn't yet know how to, what's the word, acclimate to the new change. So it leaves the body, but it tries to come back in. And only after 3 days, it sees that it can't come back into the body. Okay, so time to move back. Now, for 7 days, the soul goes again back between the grave and the home. This is one of the reasons why next week we're going to speak more about this. Shiva, we sit Shiva. It's actually preferable to sit Shiva in the home of the deceased because the soul actually remains in the house. It goes back and forth between the house and the grave for the 7 days. And then for 30 days, the soul is still located here on earth. And then finally, after 12 months, it realizes that it's time to fully disconnect, divest from this physical world, from the body in the grave, and it goes up to heaven, and then that's the end, and then it goes off to heaven. So those are, now does anyone see any correlation between the 3, 7, 30, 12 days in the way that we perform the mourning?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I don't know about the 3 days.
The 3 days is not familiar to me either,
But the 7 days is the Shiva. The 30 days is
Shloshim.
when we put Matzeva.
no, after a year you put them up to
There's different customs about that.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm not arguing, but I'm saying, so we go back to the
How do we
grave
know which one?
after 30 days.
It depends on your custom.
And
Yeah.
then we've got what you call
12 months, we say Kaddish.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
the Arta.
Rosh Hashanah.
So now Maimonides, Maimonides, he wrote the Code of Jewish Law. So text 5, now we're going to the mourning, right? This is what you all mentioned. Text 5, the mourners, Shlosha lebechi. So you said you don't know the 3 days. So now we're on page 52.
50?
52, page 52. So you mentioned that you know the 7 days and the 30 days, but what's the 3 days? It actually says, Shlosha lebechi, 3 days of crying, 7 days of eulogies, which is basically speaking about speaking about the person who passed away and their life accomplishments. 30 days, there's certain restrictions of mourning. We don't take a haircut, we don't buy new clothes, we don't make we don't do a celebration. And then there's also, like you mentioned, 12 months, depending if we're mourning a parent or another relative, there's different levels of mourning. So what we see here is something very fascinating, is that the process of mourning that we do is actually parallel to the same process that the soul itself goes through. So therefore, in a way, when we're mourning, we're not just mourning for the deceased person, but we're actually mourning with them, with the soul. The soul goes through the very same process, 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, and it's a slow process. Because it's so painful and it's such a big change, it can't happen all at once. It happens in stages. And also again, next week, we're going to speak all about the mourning process for the loved ones who are staying behind. But when we feel the grief and the loss, it's something which we don't heal in a day. It's something which it's a process. There's 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, 12 months. It's a very personal process as well that we go through to grieve and to heal. And the same thing is for the soul itself. Now, based on this very beautiful idea that, or it's kind of fascinating idea that the soul is going through this process as well, this will help us understand a very interesting law in the Talmud. So text 7 on page 54. Maybe I'll ask someone from the Zoom. Paul, would you like to read something? If we can hear you. Are you there? We can't. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we could. Would you like to read page 54, text 7?
If a person dies and leaves no next of kin to be comforted, 10 people should go and sit in the deceased's home. A man died in Rabbi Yehuda's neighborhood. As there were no mourners to be comforted, Rabbi Yehuda assembled 10 people every day, and they sat in the deceased's home. After 7 days, the dead man appeared to Rabbi Yehuda in a dream and said, "May your mind be at rest, for you have set my mind at rest."
So if I guess the idea that we're trying to explain here is, before we came to this class, I think the basic way we understand all the customs and traditions of mourning and everything we do, it's to comfort the ones who are remaining behind, the loved ones. They lost a loved one, so we're coming to sit Shiva to comfort them. So imagine someone who doesn't have any children, any relatives, he has no one, and he passes away. Seemingly, there's no purpose in sitting Shiva because there is nobody to comfort. But we see here in the story that Rabbi Yehuda said, no, he brought a minion of 10 people to the house, even though there was no one there to sit Shiva. And they came there and they sat Shiva for him. Why? What? For the soul. For the soul. Because the soul gets comfort from us when we do this Shiva. And this goes back to the fundamental idea that's sort of behind this whole lesson. The premise is that the relationship that we have with the deceased person continues after they pass away. So therefore, we can comfort the soul. Where the soul is, because the soul is still alive and the nefesh is still in the body, the soul is very conscious and aware of what's happening here in this world. And when the soul knows that we are here and remembering it and sitting Shiva, doing all these things, it actually gives comfort and it helps the soul go through the painful transition. And that's again the reason why Rabbi Yehuda wanted to sit Shiva, even if there was nobody to sit Shiva.
That's what I was going to say. If for a reason or another you can't get 10 people to really sit the Shiva.
Yes, you still sit Shiva.
You can still do something for the soul.
Yeah, you don't have to have 10 people to sit Shiva. So we have the 4 stages of mourning.
The Kaddish, if you are 10 people.
Yes, correct.
Because then you can't read the Kaddish, only one, if you are one, or don't know. Happen situation that
so we will get to Kaddish later, in a later lesson, yeah. Okay, so now moving on to the next part of the lesson. Based on this idea that we explained, that the deceased person is very much alive even after they pass away. And not only that, but even the body, we said the nefesh, the lowest part of the soul, is still connected to the body, especially we said for 3 days, for 30 days, the soul doesn't just disappear. So when we have, I don't know if anyone here has ever been in a situation where you've been in the presence of a deceased person
At what stage?
after they passed away.
What, immediately after, or?
Anytime, yeah.
Yeah.
I have,
Yeah.
I have,
Okay.
when my auntie died.
So I'm sure it's a very distressful time and you know thing to experience. But what we're saying here is that the soul isn't like a lifeless body, like a lifeless corpse. And that's it. After the soul left, and then the body is just kind of like, you know, you have, sorry to give you such a crass example, but this is just what popped in my head. You know, you have like a bag of chips, and after you finished all the chips, you've got the bag, you don't need it anymore. You throw it out in the bin. So like the body was just here during the lifetime to have a purpose and once the soul leaves and the body's dead, then the body has no purpose anymore. So we're going to explain now that is very far from the truth, because the body remains holy because it served as a vessel for the soul, and even after the person passes away, the body is holy. And that is the source for many of the Jewish customs of how we treat the body during the time between passing and the burial. So let's go through what that process is like. This is the concept. It's a big mitzvah actually called Levayat Hames. Right? What is a funeral in Hebrew? How do you say funeral?
Levaya.
Levaya. What does the word levaya mean?
To escort.
To escort. Okay? So to escort.
That's lovely.
And what that means is that we're actually escorting the soul on its final journey. Now, in a sort of non-Jewish funeral home, I've never been to a non-Jewish funeral, but I would assume they do some sort of service in the funeral home or in a church. And then after the service, where does everyone go?
So it's the reception.
They go to the bar, they go to a reception, they go home. But in Judaism, the true mitzvah isn't to be at the funeral home or to be there at the service. The true mitzvah is to actually physically escort the coffin all the way to the cemetery, or if not to the cemetery, at least to follow after. Yes, okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to actually escort.
It's got slack these days.
Right.
Like holding bodies for 4 weeks.
Sorry, I think you said the mitzvah is to escort from where to where?
So ideally, the mitzvah is to go all the way to the cemetery, escort the car, follow the car all the way to the cemetery, and if not, at least to, I don't know if you've seen like the pictures or videos where someone who can't go to the cemetery, they will take a few steps after the car, and then the car will drive off.
Okay.
So those taking a few steps, that is the mitzvah of Levayat Hames, to escort. And again, the soul is conscious and cognizant and aware of the people who are escorting them, and they receive comfort by knowing that they're being remembered in that way and being escorted on their final journey to be buried. A very, very special mitzvah, and it supersedes even doing other mitzvot. You know, this is from just a halachic perspective. It's more important than, imagine you have a clash in your diary. I can either go to a wedding, which is a mitzvah to go to a wedding, or I can go to a levaya. And which is more important? The levaya, because that is called in Hebrew chesed shel emet. What does chesed shel emet mean? True kindness. Why? Because when you do a favor to someone here in this world, there's always the notion that maybe they'll return the favor one day. But when you're doing a favor to a person who passed away, you know that favor is never being returned. So it's a real chesed shel emet. It's a true kindness, because you're giving a favor. It's sort of the last and final favor that you can do for them, which is not going to be returned. Now, the Talmud says that, this is text, page 55. One who is present at the time of a person's passing is required to tear their clothing, and this is because a person's passing is likened to the burning of a Torah scroll. So, you know, you're familiar with the concept of tearing kriya, of rendering their garments. This is the direct mourners, whether it's a spouse or a child who is sitting shiva, they render their garments. Again, we will get to that also a little bit next week. But it says that even a non-relative who is present at the moment of passing, traditionally, the mitzvah is that they need to render the garments, because we should never witness this, God forbid, but it says if a Torah scroll is burned, that's the most sort of devastating thing that can happen, and it happened in history where they burned, scrolls, and it says that you need to render your garments. Now, just to tell you sort of an interesting fact is that we don't follow this nowadays. The reason is because what happened was the sages saw that people, especially in the olden days when people only had a few articles of clothing, they didn't want to have to lose their clothing. So people sort of avoided going to see someone on their deathbed because they didn't want to lose their clothing, especially when they didn't have much other. So therefore the sages said, you know what, better go and be there and not have to tear your clothing. But the reason why we're bringing this up is because to show the parallel that a person passing is like the burning of a Torah scroll. What does that mean? What is this? What is this connection? So, what?
Be tearing rather than burning.
No, sorry,
You
the
know what I
tearing
mean?
off the clothing. is the
No, I'm
burning.
talking about the Torah scroll.
If a person is
The
present,
connection between burning and tearing. Because when you're tearing it, then surely the tearing.
no, we're saying the connection between a person passing away or a human being, the body is similar to a Torah scroll. So just like when a Torah scroll is burned, we have to tear the garments. So when a person passes away, it's like, so therefore we have to. So why are we comparing a person to a Torah scroll?
Burning,
Yeah, that will be next week.
sign of-
So that will be next week. We'll speak all about that. Yes.
Isn't it because when we received the Torah at Har Sinai in Moshe Avinu, that all the souls of, from
Yes.
before, present, and future, everybody was there. So there's the saying that every neshama is a letter in the Torah. All of us are part of the Torah.
Correct.
Is that
That
correct?
is, yeah, yes, that is correct.
Okay,
So now,
thank you.
so now to explain another idea is that, remember last week we spoke, the body is, the way God formed the body for the first time, it was flesh and bones, and then he infused the soul into the body, right? So too, the Torah scroll, how do you make a Torah scroll? You take a hide, animal skins, and that hide initially is not holy. That hide could have become a leather belt or shoes. It happened to be chosen to be used to become the parchment on which a Torah scroll is written. Then they write God's names on the parchment in the Torah scroll, and now the whole Torah scroll becomes holy. Can you separate the letters and the parchment? The whole thing becomes one entity of holiness. So that is the analogy here, is that once the soul infuses the body itself being a vehicle for the soul, and like we said before, you can't separate them during the lifetime of a person. It's not like batteries in a device. It's one entity. And being here, the body having that sort of sacred mission of being the vehicle and the vessel for the soul, so too the body itself becomes holy. And even after, now, what happens if a Torah scroll becomes invalid? Like if a Torah scroll is very old and the words, and you can't use it anymore, what do we do with the old Torah scroll? We bury it. Can you just take it and say, oh, it's not, it's not holy anymore, and we just throw it out? No, to bury it. So to a body, even after the soul left, the body retains its holiness, and therefore has to be, the way we, sort of the overarching approach that Judaism has, how do we deal with a deceased body, specifically in Judaism, is it's done with what's called in Hebrew, kavod hamet, which means sensitivity and honor for the deceased body. We don't just say, oh, the person's not alive anymore. They don't even know what we're doing, so we can just go and toss them around and do what we have to do to stick them in the coffin. No, we treat the body with holiness, with respect, because we don't treat it like a lifeless body. Very good. The body never becomes impure. It's a good question, and it's actually a very common misconception. We know there's this concept called tumat hamet, which means the impurity of a body, which is why kohanim, people that come from the tribe of the kahuna, of the priests, they're not allowed to become impure. So they're not, unless it's for a relative, they're not allowed to go to a cemetery, etc. But the distinction is, this is something which is not very known. Tumat hames, which means again the impurity of the body itself does not become impure. It's only the people who come and who touch and become in contact with the body, they become ritually impure, but the body itself doesn't. And if you want to understand the reason why there's the whole concept of ritual impurity, why when you touch the body do you become impure, it's actually, there's fascinating ideas. I don't know, I can either tell it to you now briefly, or I think we will get to it in another lesson as well. But it's basically, very short, it was something which, there's a few reasons. There's mystical reasons, it's like, and then there's reasons, it was basically to avoid, I better not get into it because I don't want to confuse you, but we can get back to it after the lesson, I can tell you. But the answer to your question is the body itself does not become impure. Tumat hames, is the people who touch the body become impure, not the body itself. Okay? Now, text 8b, Nachmanides points to the sacred names of God, page 56. So Nachmanides points to the sacred names of God that are inked onto the Torah scrolls parchment as an analogy for the sacred soul that is installed within the corporeal body. So now, page 57, text 9. This is from one of the sort of fundamental books in Jewish law on the topic of burial and life and death, of how to deal with death and burial, called Gesher HaChaim, which would be translated as the bridge of life. So he writes, all who tend to a corpse must be aware that they are handling a holy entity. The human body is more than simply a sheath to a sacred entity, a tool that served a supernal soul. Rather, it has itself become sanctified with an independent holiness similar to a Torah scroll. Okay? So,
I didn't understand
which one?
the 88, text 88, not many, page 56.
That he says that the reason why we're comparing the person to a scroll is just like a scroll, a Torah scroll, has God's name written on it. So you have the letters of God's name, and then you have the parchment that it's written on. So to a human being, you have the soul, which is like the letters of God's name is the soul, and you have the body that the soul comes into. So just like a Torah scroll, once the letters of God's name is written on the parchment, the whole thing becomes holy. So to a body, since the body was a vessel for the soul, the body retains its holiness. Now, every sizable Jewish community has what's called the Chevra Kadisha. Chevra Kadisha is translated as the holy society. And their job is to deal with the burial preparations. And again, the way we do this in Judaism, the Jewish approach, is that everything is done with very much what we call, again, kavod hamet, with respect to the body, and they prepare the body for burial. So what are some things that we do? So first of all, the body is handled with respect and dignity. It's not thrown around and, it's handled as if it's a living body. So there's the process of tahara. I'm not sure if you heard about it or not. Before we bury a body, we purify the body in a mikvah. So first it's cleansed in warm water, and then it's either dipped into a mikvah, which is a mikvah of water, or if there's no mikvah, they pour water over the body. And this is, again, it's a spiritual cleansing of the body to prepare it.
The same that people.
No. Absolutely, yeah. And this is kind of, there's the link between and we're going to get to this actually soon as well. The way the same way we're born, that's the same way the soul is born and the body comes into this world. That's also the same way we leave. So, for example, the baby in the mother's womb, it's like surrounded with the liquid. I don't know what it's called of the mother's womb, the fluids, right? That's like the mikvah. So again, we're emulating that as well by putting the body sort of back into that, bringing it back to where it came from, putting it in the mikvah, and so then it's dressed in shrouds. There's no casual conversation. It's not like when the Chevra Kadisha, again, the burial society, when they're doing it, they're not speaking, hey, what's for lunch? What time are you going? No, we're very careful how we speak in the presence of the body. The body is always kept covered. It's not left uncovered. It's never placed face down because that would be disrespectful. It's always guarded. So this is the concept of shmirah, which is the honor guard, which is actually something that we try to do as much as possible, is never to leave the body left alone. From the moment it passes away to the burial, we never want to leave the body left alone. Always there should be someone there, not because we're worried that the body, you know, like in the olden days when they didn't have, you know, all the modern hospitals and everything, you know, you can say, you know, back then there was a worry maybe someone would come and, I don't know, desecrate the body. We're not, it's not that. It's more about respect, showing respect just by being present. Some people have accustomed to recite Psalms, Tehillim, in the presence of the body, or even just being there is an act of respect. And
even during the daytime, doesn't mean at night time also?
If possible, as much as possible. So a couple.
Dies at the hospital and you can't.
If we can't, we can. So it's not always 100%, but we try if we can. Just to, you know, Leah's grandfather just passed away a few months ago. Leah's mother's father, he was in New Haven. He was 92 years old. He was in the hospital. It was Shabbat, and then Motzei Shabbat, Saturday evening, we got the news that the doctor said that it was almost the time, and right away, all of the family. It was we say a mazal because we were all in New York. Do you know once a year they have the gathering of all the Chabad rabbis in New York every year?
Oh, yeah.
It was that weekend, and we were. Rabbi Dubov's parents was there. We were all in New York, and that moment they all went to the hospital, and straight away we all were present, not in the room, so it could be an adjacent room.
Where was they asked that?
In New York. We were all there. Yes, yeah. So we were all there. We stayed up all night. We had a rota to stay there next, again, not in the same room as the body, but it could be in a room next to it. And all of this, again, the purpose of all of this we're trying to say is that after they pass away, it's not finished. There is still a level of soul that's in the body, and the soul is very much aware of what's happening, and we want to show that respect. Okay. So those are some of the.
I don't understand that part when they say that for those who maintain which are actively performing the mitzvah to the extent that they are meanwhile absolved from many of the mitzvot, such as reading the Shema and reciting.
Yes. So there is a rule in halacha that if you're occupied with doing one mitzvah, then you're exempt from doing another mitzvah. If you're busy doing one thing, you can't do two things at the same time. So if a person is doing the guarding of the body, that is a mitzvah to the extent that he doesn't have to do any other mitzvah. He doesn't have to pray or anything, because just being there present, even if he's not doing anything, just his very presence is in itself. Yes, you can. One thing I forgot to mention is there is no, I mean, we're saying that we're just trying to explain how powerful it is that they don't have to, because sometimes if you're very distracted, yeah.
You can still be praying.
You can, yes.
If it's at the hospital also, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. One thing I forgot to say before, as a rabbi, one of the things that I will occasionally be called for is to come to do the last prayers with a person before they pass away. Often I'll be called to come to the hospital or to home of a person, and there is the most important prayer to say, everyone knows it, is the Shema Yisrael.
Yeah.
That is the traditional prayer that we've said for thousands of years, and it's very important when a person knows that their time is coming, if you can help them, if they don't know it themselves, or even if they're unconscious, to go and say it for them. That is a very special thing to do. I forgot to mention that before. Okay.
Quick
Now,
question.
yes.
When the guarding, it's always got to be the men who do it. What if there's not enough men and women? Can the women guard the body until they come and take the body for the cleansing?
Yes, yeah, it could be anyone.
Okay. Oh, because when I was present once, it was my uncles who did it, and they put my auntie on the floor and surrounded her with candles and kept the prayer going until we were able to take her for the cleansing and the burial. But we were kept separated. The women weren't allowed to come into the room.
Right. It could be that different customs in different places. I didn't hear about the candles.
It was Sephardic, Moroccan.
Yeah, yes. Now,
Thank you.
There's one more very interesting thing based on this idea that the body is like a Torah scroll. It will explain something very fascinating, again, in Jewish law, which is very present even in modern day, unfortunately now as well, in Israel. There is a mitzvah that every part of the body has to be buried. So that includes skin, bone fragments, tissue, fluids, everything. So I'm sure you heard of Zaka, right? Zaka in Israel.
Yeah.
If there is, God forbid, a terror attack, Zaka, they're a group and they're actually specializing going to collect
Yeah.
all the parts of the body
Oh.
to bury it. So you may ask, like, why is that important, right? And as we know, unfortunately now from, the whole story of the hostages and everything, how the IDF, they went to such great lengths, like the world thinks that Israel might be crazy. Like, why do we go to such great lengths?
But when they were during the 7th of October, they were gathering.
Yes.
I didn't know it was called Zaka.
Zaka is just the name of the organization.
What is the translation for Zaka?
I'm actually not sure. Does it stand for something? But
It's a
Yeah.
abbreviation.
yeah, it must be for something. I don't know what it stands for. Zaka.
Zion Kuf Aleph. I don't know what it stands for, do you?
I don't know.
Now, as we know, unfortunately, that to what great lengths the IDF went to retrieve a body that's already deceased, that's dead, the dead hostages for burial. So looking at this from a completely secular perspective, it's absurd. You're going to risk lives and make such a big deal. I mean, if the person is dead, they're dead, just to bring them to have a Jewish burial. And it's a bit crazy. And now we're going to hopefully explain why. Because in Judaism, having a Jewish burial it's sort of coming full circle. And the importance of Jewish burial is so important in Jewish belief to the extent that we will go to any level. Like you said, even when there's one hostage left who has not received a Jewish burial, we will do everything we can. And we have here someone on the call whose brother was actually involved in this process of retrieving the bodies of the remaining hostages. And
Yeah.
now why is it important that every part of the body, so for example, if there is let's say blood left on the sheets, those are buried together with the body. Now, why is that important? Because if you go back to the analogy we said before, that the body is like a Torah scroll, just like a Torah scroll, even one letter of the Torah scroll is holy, just like the whole Torah. Let's say if God forbid, a certain one page of the Torah scroll gets cut off, it's holy just like anything else. Like Rina, you mentioned before that every Jew was present at Mount Sinai because every Jew is like a letter in the Torah scroll. So we see from here that every single part of the body is part of the Torah scroll and therefore is sacred and therefore requires to be buried in the same honorable and respectful way, just like the rest of the body. Now let's talk about burial itself, okay?
Just before.
Yeah. Yes.
So we talked last week about Ya'avor v'lo Ya'ared,
Yeah.
okay?
Yared v'lo Ya'avor.
No, the other way.
No, yes, I know what you're getting at.
Mm.
Yes.
So to save life is so important that you can not do lots of mitzvot,
Right.
okay? Why can you not donate organs to save life?
Very good question. So that's a great question. Why about donating organs to save a life?
By the way, I didn't know that you're not
Yeah.
allowed to do that.
Yeah, how do you know we can't?
I didn't know.
How do you know that we can't? You're coming with a premise saying that we can. How do you
Yeah.
know?
Because, well, I don't know is the answer.
I got a donor card in my
That is
wallet.
the notion that you get
Mm.
from religious people objecting to any donation
Yeah.
operations or anything, because you have to bury the whole body.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer you in a nutshell. Really, the whole topic of donating organs is a fascinating topic, and we have a full course on that, medical ethics. It would go in that course, but I'll tell you in a nutshell. I'll tell you a few points. Number one, it's not yes or no. There are cases when it's allowed, and there are cases when it's not allowed, generally speaking, and also certain things there are different opinions. But basically, what is the general rule? Are you donating an organ to actually save someone's life who's present in front of us, or it's just going into a bank, which will maybe one day save someone's life? Halachically, it's not the same.
Yes.
If there is a person now that needs the organ, it is permissible. It is permissible to donate an organ. However, what's not allowed, what's more problematic is to donate it just for the purpose of helping, maybe to go to a bank. Now, another complexity, another reason why this is very complicated is because most of the time they take the organs when the person is brain dead. However, halakhically, it's not so simple because brain dead halakhically is not fully dead until the heart stops. And after the heart stops, the usage of the organs diminishes a little bit.
Yes.
So that is another reason why. So what happens? You're actually, by taking out the organs before the person's fully dead, you're actually killing the person to save another person. Could you kill someone to save someone else? No. So that's why I'm just giving you a few nuggets, but it's really a very fascinating topic. Okay, so now let's go to burial. Why is burial so important, and what is Jewish burial all about? And really, we're on page 61. So the Torah tells us in Deuteronomy, Devarim, page 61. Yeah. That's what I'm reading now, yes.
But you said.
Yeah, this is what I'm up to now. So it says that you shall surely bury him on the same day as his death. So here is the source of burying and also the importance of burying as soon as possible. Now, a few things to mention on this. Number one is you don't have to bury the same day, but the idea is we try to bury as soon as possible within the next day or two. And the general guiding principle is that if postponing a burial is going to help with, well, again, kavod hames, it's going to give honor. So for example, unfortunately me, I had to go travel to America for passing of a sibling, and I was here. So I had to travel abroad. And
It took you a couple of days.
Not a couple of days, but it took me a day. I made it on time, but so postponing a burial for like a day, in order for a child to travel, that's allowed. But we don't, nowadays you can just stick the body in a freezer for a month and say, oh, like the Queen, when the Queen passed away, the funeral was, a month later. In Judaism, we no. Why? Based on everything we explained, it's very understood because remember, the soul is in limbo, and the soul, after the person passes away, and before you bury, it's painful for the soul to be not here and not there. It's in between worlds. And therefore, we want to make that as quick as possible so the soul can come finally to its comfort, to its rest. A couple of days. In Israel, they do it very swiftly. Israel, sometimes they'll do it within like... Correct.
They were in a fridge for
right.
weeks. Sometimes it's what happened to
yeah.
my brother.
There's also a problem in
What happened for the soul when the body is in the fridge?
It's difficult. So in this country, right. So in this country,
you have to have
a
certificate.
Exactly.
You have to have the reason for the death.
Yes.
And it takes weeks sometimes.
Sometimes. So we have the constraints of the country that we live in, but we have to make the utmost effort to try to.
Thinking about that. What happened? When the person dies in the hospital, you couldn't, even the wife couldn't even go and see her own husband. That was horrible.
Right. So the soul, it still does ascend to heaven, but it's still partially connected down here until the body is laid to rest. So now, due to constraints of time, I'm going to go a little bit swiftly, but we have here from King Solomon, text, page 62, it says that the people proceed to their eternal abodes and the mourners go about the streets. The dust returns to the earth as it was, while the spirit returns to God who bestowed it. So we have here where, the soul, God puts the soul in the body when it's born, and then God chooses when the time is right, and God takes the soul back. So just like the soul returns back to where it came from, the body also returns to where it came from. Just like the body came from earth, we said last time Adam was created from earth. That's the reason why we return the body to where it came from, to the earth. Now, that is the reason. So, now going, if you read through the Bible, the Torah, you have burial left, right, and center. You have the very first episode of burial actually happened when Adam, Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel. And Adam was there. He had no idea what to do. He saw the dead body laying in front of him. He didn't know. No one told him about burial. And the Medrash tells us a story. It tells us that he saw a bird burying another dead bird. and from there he took the cue to bury, and the first one he buried was Abel. Then we have Abraham, who went to great lengths to buy the cave of Machpelah in Hebron, right, to bury his wife Sarah, and then he was later buried there. And Isaac and Ishmael, they buried their father Avram. Jacob buried his wife Rachel. Everywhere you read the Torah, you've got burying.
Yeah.
Jacob requested to be buried in Israel. Joseph requested to be buried in Shechem. Till today, you can go in Nablus, visit the tomb of Joseph. If anyone is familiar with the story of Ruth,
With the Moabite.
the Moabiyah. So she said to her mother-in-law,
No.
when she converted to Naomi, to her mother-in-law, and she converted, she said, where you go, I will go, your fate is
Yeah.
my fate. And then she also mentioned, she said, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And according to many commentaries, in that declaration that she made, that is when she converted to Judaism. And meaning she mentioned the importance of being buried in a Jewish cemetery, basically, being buried together with the Jewish people, so that we see that mentioned as well. No. So now, this touches upon the topic of cremation, which unfortunately is becoming more and more common. So what is the Jewish opinion on cremation? Does anyone know?
I don't think
It's not allowed.
Not
No,
allowed.
I say no.
No.
I always said no. Anything, first thing in my will, I said from when I was younger.
So what's the reason why?
It's something I have inside of me.
Being happy.
Yeah.
Is it got to do, Rabbi Yossi, with the bones? Because when this is in the Torah, when the Mashiach comes and we're returned to eternal life,
Very good.
bones have the marrow in the bones carry the essence of our neshama
Yeah.
or something like that. I
Called
don't
the
know.
luz
I'll
bone, yes.
carry on.
Yeah, it says that there is one bone in the body called the luz bone behind the neck that never disintegrates. It's called the luz. Luz is the name of one small bone in the body that even after the body decomposes, that bone doesn't decompose.
Really?
And it says that in the future, after the resurrection, will come from that bone.
All right.
So cremation, you're basically, what you're doing by cremating, you're destroying the body. Now, remember what we mentioned before, the body, even after it passes away, there is an element of life in the body. So it's a very painful process. It's a very painful experience for the soul when the body is burned. Now, obviously, we know that in the Holocaust, unfortunately, that was some of the, when the people that want to do sort of the worst to us, they'll cremate, they'll burn us. But they know that's the sort of the biggest desecration to a Jewish person is to burn them. And but in terms of sort of our, when we have our own choice, cremation, you're burning the body, which is by doing that you're violating the ability to bury the body, which is putting it back to where it came from. Now, so there are two things. Number one, there are two fundamental beliefs in Judaism, which are both would be sort of violated by cremating. Number one is the belief that our body doesn't belong to us. Our body was given to us by God. Therefore, we have to take care of our body, just like someone gives you something to watch, you have to take care of it. Imagine someone comes and says, I want you to harm me. I want you to go and harm me, punch me and beat me up. Will you listen to them? No, you won't listen to them. So that's why actually, there's a very fascinating thing as well. Text 15b on page 64. It says that 15a, that it's a mitzvah to listen to the final wishes of a deceased. But there's one very fascinating, surprising exception. If a person says, I don't want to be buried, the Torah says that is the only exception. We do not listen to them. And we do not, even if they said, and why is that? Because just like I gave you the example, if someone comes and says, I want you to beat me up, I want you to harm me, we won't listen. The body, even though as much as I try to think my ego thinks that my body is mine, Judaism has a belief that my body was given to me as a gift from God. It was a deposit. And when the time is up, God chooses and he takes the soul back. But the body, we can't give the body back. So what do? We return it in the same way it was given. It was given from the ground. It's returned to the place where it was given from. Last week, we learned that Adam was created from the body was created from the earth. So we return the body to the place where it was created from, to the earth. And that is a sort of a declaration that we're returning it to God. And the second declaration is the faith of the resurrection of the dead. We believe, as far off as it might seem, again, we'll come back to this in lesson 6, that there will be the future resurrection of the dead. And by burning the body, we're basically saying we don't want to have any part of that, and we don't believe in that. So therefore we say, look, we're putting the body back in the ground, and it's something which will come to use in the future, please God, when the body is resurrected. So it's entrusted as a deposit. The body comes from the earth, so the deposited must be returned to where it came from. And the burial is an affirmation that we believe our bodies belong to God. It's not for us to decide how to inter the body, and we believe in the resurrection of the dead. So the prohibition against cremation is associated with some of Judaism's core beliefs, and it's something which is irreversible. Once the body is burned, it's finished. It's a mitzvah to listen to the wishes of a person but in this case, we don't. Now, you can say, but ethically, how could you not listen to a person's wish? If a person writes in his will, I want to be cremated, ethically, how can he do that? The answer is two things. Number one, again, we said that as much as a person's ego might think so, but our bodies, we believe, don't belong to us. So for just as much as a person says, I want you to harm me, we're not going to listen to them. Same too, if a person says, I want you to burn my body, we don't listen. It's an extremely, extremely painful experience for the soul, and we don't do it. Number two, after a person died, their soul is in the world of truth. And we believe that at that moment, the soul then knows the truth. And at that moment, the soul actually sort of changed his mind, even though it can't communicate to us, that it really does want to do what is right. Now, practically speaking, I'm coming to you as a rabbi. Unfortunately, I did have to deal with this multiple times. Coming to a family after a person passed away who wrote in his will that he wants to be cremated and trying to convince them to change their mind is almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's not.
Jewish family.
Even yes, it's very difficult to try to come to a family after a person passed away and try to convince them to do it. It is possible, and if you have a few minutes, I'll indulge you in a beautiful video I'll tell you in a moment about this. However, what's much more preferable is to try to bring awareness, because most people, it's a lack of knowledge. There's a few reasons why people choose cremation. Yeah, why do people choose cremation?
Do you get Jewish people wanting to be cremated?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's brainwashing. Growing up in this country.
Why would people choose cremation? If you just had to say, what would be some reasons?
It's an unrealistic fear that we're still around with our body and are going to be eaten up, and they're thinking about maggots and all sorts. When I don't want to have that happen to my body. I'd rather be cremated. It's an unrealistic fear.
Okay. Any other reason you may think why a person might choose cremation?
Because they don't know any better.
Don't know any better?
I agree.
It's rich.
I think not the Jewish way of thinking, but others feels that this is the real return to nature
Really?
rather than earth.
Okay.
From earth.
But again, that's what
Because after
makes brainwashing
after the
people.
burning, you become
I think even
Is it because-
Yeah, body become
the
acid.
Jewish, there's people-
It's
I
a
mean,
way to
it's
become
really- I mean-
one and part of the universe.
Just that you know, locally here, they have 3 or 4 burial grounds where you don't have to rent the space and everything. And people can actually be buried going straight back to the earth.
Right. That's called,
No,
those are called natural or green burials.
you're really quite local to quite a few here. We're very
Yeah.
lucky.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
And that is actually, Judaism actually has that. It's a new modern idea. Judaism always, because we don't bury in a metal casket.
No.
It has to be something that can disintegrate,
Yeah.
disintegrate.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be a wooden casket, something that can, or in
See,
Israel, they do often with no.
I buried my husband and with having a tree placed after a year above his grave.
Right.
So as well, but anyways, it is something that a lot of people are returning to, and
Right.
having to plant a tree as well above.
That's beautiful. Now, one other thing is, for some people, it might be a financial thing, because a burial might be more expensive. So it's important to know that in every community, the Jewish Hever Kadisha will go to great lengths to subsidize if needed so for example, here in the UK, the United Synagogue, if someone comes and says, I cannot afford burial, and now I'm going to say, one of the reasons it could be financial. Burial, it actually could be quite expensive. And actually, many people are members of a synagogue purely for the purpose of getting a burial. Now, we actually, by the way, if anyone is interested in Chabad, we have we also have an option for a fairly cheap price where you can become a member, and you basically, it depends sort of at what age you're joining, you get all the burial from A to Z fully sort of taken care of. But for some people, they say, look, the cremation is cheaper than burial. Right.
Adding also
Correct.
the burial.
Right.
We've been paying for years for that.
So like over here, for example, in the UK, the United Synagogue, the office, they will actually, if someone says that they cannot afford burial and they're choosing cremation because of that, they will say, we will sort of match your price. Whatever you would pay for cremation, pay for that, and we will take care of the burial for that. So in other words, it's a very big mitzvah to help, just again, going back to is the IDF, going to great lengths to bring a fallen soldier to Jewish burial, because that is the ultimate mitzvah. The Jewish community, we have each other's backs. And if that is the reason, if it's economical, we will sort of come to me and we will make sure that that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Now, sort of, the last section I think we'll leave because it's getting late. But if you want, I just think it's a beautiful story. Rabbi Leah's father is Rabbi Dubov from Wimbledon. He's the Chabad rabbi in Wimbledon. He's a very famous lecturer in the Jewish world. In fact, he's going to Israel next week to speak. And I mentioned before that once a year we have the International Conference of Chabad Rabbis in New York. And so about 10 years ago, maybe, he was the keynote speaker for this conference. And he spoke to sort of 6,000 people, a very daunting task to speak to a very big crowd. 45-minute speech. But there's one story. If you have a couple minutes, if you want, I will play the story, and that will be the end. Would you like?
Yeah.
It's a story about how he dealt here in Wimbledon.
Please. I love Rabbi.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to show the video. Share screen. Sorry, I need to make sure that you can see the video. Okay. I was actually there at his speech, and I remember it was there we go. I can send you the link after, you can watch the whole thing, but this is only one clip of it. This was in about 10 years,
2014.
2014, yeah. This is just, I got to the exact point of the story about dealing with a cremation.
Let me share with you a story. One day I'm sitting in the office and the phone rings, and I answer the phone, Shalom. So I go, Shalom. Obviously it's like a call from Israel. You need to save my father, comes the voice. Eifo Abba, where is your father? Ukavar niftar. He passed away. So I said, so how can I save him if he passed away? Story was as follows. There lived in Wimbledon a famous actor called Peter Fry. In his first marriage, he had a daughter who later in life became a Chozeret B'Teshuvah, a Torah-observant Jewess, and was now known as Mindel. Mindel had married and settled in the Mea She'arim district in Jerusalem and raised a beautiful family. Peter, her father, had remarried an actress called Thelma, and Mindel was calling me to tell me that Peter had just passed away, but unfortunately, the plan was to cremate him. Mindel was desperate to stop the cremation and wanted Peter buried in a Jewish cemetery. So I reassured Mindel that I would call Thelma and try my best. I called and announced my name. She answered in a shrill voice, I have no desire to speak to you. Click, and she put the phone down on me. Well, that's the end of that, I thought. A minute later, Mindels calls back and she says, "No." I said, well, she put the phone down on me. She said, "Call her back. And I'm now going to the kotel to pray for success." So I called Thelma back and I said, "Listen here, just before you put the phone down on me again, I've got your stepdaughter calling me incessantly from Jerusalem. Just let me speak to you for 5 minutes, and at least I can say I've tried." "Fine then, if you want to come Sunday morning, 11 a.m. But I'm telling you, you will not change my mind. The cremation is booked for Monday." I called Mindel back. She said, "Right. She's arranging a 24-hour vigil of people to say Tehillim at the Kotel." On my part, I wrote to the Rebbe, I asked for a bracha. And actually, in my heart of hearts, I knew that aside from the issue of cremation, my goal here was actually to bring these two women together. Sunday morning, I arrived at this stunning apartment overlooking the world-famous Wimbledon tennis courts. The door to the apartment was open, and as I entered, I had this gut feeling that Thelma, being an actress, some high drama was about to unfold. I walked into the room, and there she was, sitting on a couch, looking out this magnificent view of the courts, and without turning towards me, and without any of the traditional English introductory niceties, she just said in that same shrill voice, "I suppose you're going to tell me that I shall burn in the hereafter if I cremate Peter." I said, "Madam, I couldn't give a hoot if you burn in the hereafter or not." She said, "How dare you speak to me like that?" I said, "How dare you not stand up when a rabbi walks in the room?" She points to the chair and says, "Sit down." I said, "Thank you." I knew the ice had been broken. I said, "Listen, I know you're grieving, but what's the business with cremation?" She curled her nose, rolled her eyes, and said, "I can't bear the thoughts of the maggots in the grave." I said, "Madam, have you ever felt the heat of a flamethrower?" She rolled her eyes again and said, "I can't bear the thought of the pomp and ceremony of a funeral." I said, "Madam, I'll bury him with no pomp and ceremony." She said, "You can't do that, you need a minyan." I said, "I'll bury him without a minyan." She said, "You can't do that because if you don't have a minyan, you can't say Kaddish." I said, "Madam, in this instance, Jewish law allows me to bury him with no minyan and no Kaddish." And besides the point, I said to her, "If you bury Peter, you will have a loving stepdaughter and loving grandchildren." I hadn't noticed, but earlier, right next to her on an antique coffee table was a green form. Now in England, that's the form that releases the body to the undertaker. She picked up the green form, she handed it to me, and she said, "Take it before I change my mind." With my hand trembling, I took it. I said, "Thank you." And I walked briskly out of the room. I looked at my watch. It was 11:30 a.m. At 5 p.m. that day, I, together with 3 other members of the Chevra Kadisha, buried Peter at the Adas Yisrael Cemetery in London. When I called Mindel after the funeral to tell her the good news, she said, the Tehillim worked. I said, well, I thought I did have something small to do with it. But then I realized that for some unknown reason to me, Peter had a merit to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. It was Mindel's Tehillim that broke through the barriers in heaven. But there was something small needed, and that was some shaliach had to go and do the job. And the Heilige Lubavitcher Rebbe said, I'll send one of my lads to do the job, and I will go with him to make sure it gets done. So, Chevra, when you are faced with the impossible, just know that ich fordach mit euch, that when the Rebbe is with you, the impossible becomes possible. By the way, that's not the end of the story. 10 months later, the phone rings and the unmistakable voice of Mindel says, Shalom? I thought, oh no, I hope Peter didn't die again. I can't really cope with that. No, Mindel said, she's coming to England for Peter's stone setting. I think in America you call it an unveiling. And since you're the only person who knows where he's buried, she asked that I take her and Telma to the cemetery. And so you have this bizarre scene. On one side of the Jewish spectrum, Mindel, the ultra-Orthodox Meah Sha'arim woman sitting in the car. With the other side of the Jewish spectrum, the secular actress Telma. And who is driving them? The Chabad Shaliach, bringing the entire Jewish world together. I led them to the grave, and a voice inside me said, step back and let these two women who loved Peter in their own way grieve privately. And it was at this point that I lament the fact that I didn't have a video camera, because what happened next was something out of Hollywood. With no prearranged signal, these two women simultaneously turned towards each other, flung themselves into each other's arms, and broke out into uncontrollable sobbing. And a few minutes later, Telma walked over to me and she said, Rabbi, thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm just going to conclude with a sort of a summary of what we've learned today.
Lesson 2. Taking leave. 1. Nefesh and Ruach are two of the soul's components. After death, the Nefesh remains with the body, while the Ruach disengages and ascends to Gan Eden, paradise. 2. Once the Ruach is no longer limited to material existence, it's more accessible to all who wish to connect to it. Thus, when a person dies, our ability to spiritually connect with him or her is stronger and deeper than before. 3. Though the Nefesh remains in the grave, it retains a connection with the higher levels of the soul. The gravesite is thus a portal where we can communicate with departed souls and ask them to intercede before God on our behalf. 4. Over the course of a lifetime, the soul and body integrate and bond. Their separation at death is therefore painful for the soul. 5. The soul departs the body in stages. These stages correspond to the prescribed periods of mourning. When we mourn, we are mourning not only for the deceased, but also with the deceased. 6. Dignity and sensitivity are the underlying principles that guide the care of a corpse and its preparation for burial. This is because even after death, the body retains its special status of having been the container for the soul. 7. Burial is of highest priority in Jewish tradition and culture. When God takes a person's soul, we are tasked to return the body to the place from which God fashioned it. 8. Burial affirms two fundamental Jewish beliefs. A. Our bodies aren't ours. They belong to God. And B. There will be a resurrection of the dead in the Messianic era.
All right. I'm not going to be here next week. I'm actually in Israel for
Oh, wow.
a few days, yeah.
Okay, very something.
I'll do it on Zoom.
You can join on Zoom, yeah, just like you did in the car.
You says,
Mhm.
making, says you can go on Zoom?
I was on Zoom while sitting in a traffic jam. The A3. Did you see me on there?
I probably had a car crash.
I don't even know what happened there, but I was sitting there for about 45 minutes, not moving.
Yeah, you're good.
That's the last.
Oh, it wouldn't be too bad.
Use the sat nav. Even though you know exactly where you're going,
Thank
use
you.
the sat nav. Thank you, Avi.
Thank you very much.
But you made it in the end, Baruch Hashem. Yes.
Yeah, it's-
Page, for page 64,
Yeah,
not 64, 65, 6 and 7, it's all about the grave visitations.
yes,
I always heard that going to the cemetery is impure, and then after, both on going to the burial and the stone setting, which is the year after the burial, you're not really allowed, only for weeks, to go to the cemetery.
Maybe you're referring to the Kohanim.
correct.
Oh, I see.
When you're
Yes, exactly. No, it is okay to go. It's, in fact, it's especially on special occasions. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. We'll see you next week.
You better go as well.
Thank you, Rina and Alexandra, and all those that were on the Zoom before that dropped already. But great. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Yossi. It was excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.